All right, we're back. We're doing some more string-2 problems. Keep in mind that the whole niche behind these things is, yeah, we're working with strings, but they require loops in order to kind of process and complete, and that makes them kind of difficult. This one, not too shabby. Repeat n, given a string and an integer n, return a string made of n repetitions of the last n characters. You may assume that n is between 0 and the length of the string inclusive. All right, I think the examples do a really good job of explaining what's going on here, more so than our kind of English explanation. So given a string, such as hello, and 3, we want the last 3 characters repeated 3 times. That's what that means. We want the last 2 characters repeated 2 times. The last 1 character repeated 1 time. All right. Not too shabby. Let's get started. We see this one ultimately returns a string. So I'm going to start out with a string, which I'm going to call RTN. I plan on returning it. It's an empty string. This is effectively the 0 of string, but it is double quotes. This is a string literal. It's a string with a length of 0. So if we asked what is RTN.length, we would actually get back a 0. I'm going to start looping here. And in theory, I already have a variable to work with. Right, we could use a for loop and kind of count up to n. I imagine that's what most students are going to do, so why don't we do that? I'm going to perform this n times, right? So we're going to make a condition that is based on that. Notice we're not basing it on the string length because the number of times that we loop is based on whatever the value of n is. Okay. Before I start looping, however, I'm going to go ahead and grab a copy of the last 3 characters. We could do it with each iteration of the loop, but we would basically be doing that over and over and over again for no real reason. Those last 3 characters, they're not changing. They're not based on some index. I can go ahead and preemptively grab the last 3. I should say last n, right? Because I'm looking at this example saying 3, but it changes. It changes based on n. Okay, how do I go about getting the last n characters? Well, it's coming from str, and we're going to need to do a substring, and we can start that substring at index n. We're using the overloaded version of substring that's going to start at this index and just go through the rest of the string. Okay, if I use this as an example, we're going to start at index 3. 0, 1, 2, 3. That doesn't quite look right. I don't want to start at index 3. I want to start at 3 back from the end of the string. So we're talking str.length minus n. The length of the string is 5. All right, 5 minus 3. That's going to give me 2. We're going to start at 0, 1, 2. I'm going to start at this index and go through the rest of the string in order to get my substring. So this should be the last n characters. In this example, it's 3. In this case, 2. In this case, 1. Okay, I'm now going to loop n times. This loop will loop exactly that number of times. And what I'm going to do with each iteration is say that RTN is going to be what it was plus last n. And that's it, right? We've seen a format that's similar to this. So this can be, we can use a shorthand assignment operator. Maybe as a comment, I would consider leaving a statement as this, right? This expanded expression is the exact same thing as here. So this loop will do its thing. It'll loop n times. And after the loop is over, I'm going to return my string because we've kept adding and adding and adding to it. And you see we get a correct solution. Before I move on to the next one, I wanted to show an approach that uses a while loop. Because my loop is not really dependent on my string or my string length, it's doing n. We don't use while loops a lot. I find that students don't like while loops as much as for loops. But by using a while loop, it's actually a little bit more efficient in the sense that I don't create integer I. I don't need an additional variable. I can use the existing n and actually, make that smaller. So I'm going to say while n is greater than 0. With each iteration, what I'm going to do is say that RTN is going to be what it was plus my last n characters. And then the tricky part here is don't forget that you need to actually modify in, so it actually will approach that value. So here is another correct solution, but instead of using a for loop, I use a while loop. Notice there is no integer I. I don't need an index. It's not really based on the string length. It's just based on n. This will loop n number of times. Let's go to the next one. This one's called repeat fun. Very similar. Given a string and an integer n, return a string made of the first n characters of the string, followed by the first n minus 1 characters of the string, and so on. You may assume that n is an integer between 0 and the length of the string. Okay, looking at our example, we're taking a string like chocolate. We're going to take the first 4 characters. We're then going to take the first 3 characters, then the first 2 characters, and the first 1. So this variable is getting smaller and smaller and smaller. Since that's getting smaller anyway, I'm not going to use the for loop in this case. We ultimately need to return a string. So I'm going to create my return string, which is going to start out as empty, and we'll keep adding to it. I'm going to create a while loop. Notice that I am not doing the substring in advance, because what I'm ultimately adding to my return string is actually changing with each iteration. So this is going to need to happen inside the loop. We're going to say while n is greater than 0. What I want to do is update RTN with each iteration. I want it to become what it was plus a substring. This substring is based on n. We're going to take in and actually make it smaller and smaller and smaller, right? So using this as an example, I want the first 4 characters. How do I go about doing that? Well, it's coming from str. We'll get that using substring. I'm always starting at the beginning, right? We have 4 iterations ultimately with this example, and they always start with the first character. So we're always starting the substring at index 0. We're going to go from 0 up to n. Keep in mind on the first iteration of this, n is 4. So we're going to get a substring started at index 0 up to index 4. We're going to get the first 4 characters. I'm going to add that to RTN and save that back into RTN. This can, of course, be expressed using a shorthand assignment operator. And after I do that, I'm going to subtract 1 off n. So not only is this going to kind of count an iteration and make us approach 0, it's also going to make my substring smaller and smaller and smaller. After this is over, we're going to return RTN. And there's a correct solution. Again, notice that the substring is being cut inside of the loop because it does update. It updates with each iteration. With our previous one, we only had to get the substring 1 time, which is why I did it before the loop. It would be inefficient to do it every iteration. Here, I had to. This one's called repeat separator. Given 2 strings, word and a separator sep. So we're taking in 2 strings. Return a big string made of count occurrences of the word separated by the separator string. What? Looking at this example, the word is word. The separator is x, and we're going to do that 3 times. What ends up happening is that we have word, x, word, x, word, and in theory, like another x, right? So we got 1 less x there. This one says this and 2. So we got this, which occurs twice, and which occurs 1 less time. This one says this and, okay. I think you get the picture. Okay. There's going to be 2 approaches to this, and this is actually a kind of a common occurrence when you see it. There's one approach that's preventative. That approach says, let's never add the x here, right? So this first try, we get it right. That usually involves some type of if statement inside of your loop. Another approach says, let's add the x, and then we'll do a rollback. That is, we'll just go ahead and add it in the loop, and then after the loop, we'll remove it. Okay? I tend to be a fan of the rollback approach, and I'm going to go ahead and show you that here. We are ultimately returning a string. I'm going to loop this number of times. What I'm going to do is add to my return string. I'm going to add word followed by the separator. Right? So picture this, but with an additional X. So we're going to do word X, word X, word X, and we'll loop 3 times. RTN is going to be what it currently is plus my word plus my separator. All right? Because we're doing these both at the same time, they'll have the same number of occurrences. Again, this can be shortened as such. So what that means is after the loop is over, I have an additional X here, right? Maybe let's switch examples. Let's use this. You'll understand why. So if this is my example, what it means is after my loop is over, the value of RTN is this and this and. Right? We added word sep, we added word sep, and we did that twice. So what I need to do is effectively delete this. I'm saying delete, but in practice, you don't delete from strings. You actually can't. What you do is you make new strings. We can make a substring. I want a substring of this. I want this part. I want RTN to become a substring of itself. Again, I'm not editing RTN. I'm making a new string and then saving it back in. That's kind of what we've been doing all along, right? RTN is going to be a substring of itself starting at the very beginning, the first index, up to this part. Okay, how do I know where that is? If I was to count it out, oh, don't make me count it out. Just hear me out. We're going to do a substring starting index 0 up to this index, right? This is going to be inclusive, and all the way up to here is exclusive. This is from the back end of str. Right, so we're going to do something from the back end. So we'll subtract from the length. I just need to know how far in do I need to go. And the reason why I switched examples here is because if I showed you this one, you would have just been like, oh, -1. But it's more than that, right? With this example, it's not just 1. I need to go 3 back. What has a value of 3? The length of the separator. So here's our strategy. We start out with an empty string. We're going to iterate, count number of times. In this example, count is 2. So this loop will execute 2 times. With each iteration, I'm updating my return string. It's going to be what it was, plus the word, plus the separator. We'll do that again. It's going to be what it was, plus the word, plus the separator. So when I get to this point, using this example, this is what RTN is. I want to update RTN. I want it to become a substring of itself, starting at index 0, going up to this point. This point is effectively the length. All right, you could think of the length as right here, just beyond the string. We're going to subtract 3. We're going to go 1, 2, 3. And that's where we stop. So after I make the edits to RTN, we can return it. Oh, rip. What's str? Oh, sorry, it's called word. Of course. We've used str for like 12 problems in a row. Oh, what happened here? Bruh. How am I only get like 1 letter? It's like this is only looping a certain number of times. Oh, are we counting up? No, count's a high number. So as long as count is greater than 0, I'm doing a count minus minus. RTN is going to be a substring itself starting at index 0. I literally just did this like off camera, I promise. This looks like it's not looping enough. Right, the way that I would achieve this is we have this and, but we only added this. Oh, this should be rtn.length. Okay, all right. It tried to tell me. It's like, it's not str, bud. Okay, so I was basing it on word.length, right? And word is super short. So we were stopping super short into rtn. I was still taking the substring from rtn. I was just stopping way early, right? I kept referring to this string, and this string is the rtn string. All right. So, yep, there is our solution. The last thing I would actually show you is this step is somewhat unnecessary in the fact that I could just, at the point of return, cut my substring, right? Instead of saving it back into RTN, I'm going to figure out what the substring is and then return it, which is ultimately meeting our requirements, what we should be doing. All right. A little embarrassed. I'll move on to the next one without showing you the preventative one. Just a little bit. Given a string, consider the prefix string made of the first n chars of the string. Does that prefix string appear somewhere else in the string? Assuming the string is not empty and that n is in the range 1 to str.length. So here, we're going to get the first n characters. In this case, it's 1. So we're going to get an A. And what we want to know is, does A occur later? In this case, it does. Here we're going to get the first 2 characters, which is AB. And we're going to know, does AB appear later? And it does. Here we're getting the first 3, which is ABX. And does ABX appear later? No, it doesn't. All right. So ultimately, I'm returning a Boolean. We've done some Boolean problems before, right? In the case where we have a string, we've been making an empty string and adding to it. Where we've had an integer is usually we're keeping a count and then, returning it later. In this case, with the problems where we've had a Boolean, just the moment that we figure something out, if it's true or false, we're returning on the spot. So I don't really need to make any variables in advance here. I am, however, going to go ahead and maybe pull my first n characters, because that doesn't change. I'm going to have to use a loop in order to search, but what I'm searching for doesn't change mid-loop. So let's get the, let's create a string called first n, and that is the first n characters. It's coming from str. Thank you for calling it str this time and not something random. We're going to start at index 0 and go up to index n. Right? In this example, n is 1, so we're going to go from index 0 up to index 1. That's just going to be 1 character. Here we're going to start at index 0 and go up to index 2, so the first 2 characters, so on and so forth. I'm doing this before I loop because it's not going to change. We are ready to start looping. I'm going to use a for loop for this one. The reason being is I actually do want an index this time, because as we're going along, right, we're going to actually perform a search. Right? We're basically going to ask, is this an A? Is this an A? Is this an A? Is this an A? In order for me to do that, I'm having to cut substrings. I say substring because sometimes we're looking for 2 characters at a time, right? So if we're looking at AB, we're going to go, is this AB? Is this AB? Is this AB? Okay. So I'm going to bring up my notepad, and we're actually going to use this one as an example. This is a pretty good example. So suppose this is the string that we're looking through, and we've got our substring that we're looking for. We're looking for AB. Well, I don't want to start my search here. Obviously this is an AB. I just cut this as my substring, my first n characters. I want to start my search here. Right? That is the first opportunity. You could, in theory, start it here. It's a useless iteration. You want to start here because that is the first occasion where you could have a match. Right? Our string could immediately just be AB, AB. So we want to start here. What controls where we start? It's whatever we set I to. Okay, so what is this index? 0, 1, 2. What has a value of 2? The length of my string, right, that we just made, which also happens to be n. So instead of setting I at 0, which would start my search at the beginning of the string, I'm going to set I to n, which in this example has a value of 2. We're going to loop. I'm going to say as long as I is less than str.length. Some of you may be big brain and recognizing that that is going to cause us problems later. We'll fix those. We're going to loop through our string, but we're starting a little bit in. With each iteration, I want to get a 2-character substring, the current 2 characters. So I'm going to create a string. I'm going to call it check. You know, in previous ones, we've called this, 2 or 3 or something like that because we knew exactly. I could say like nchars, I guess. What I can't call it is n because n already exists as an integer. So I'm going to call it check. It is going to be the current n characters. In my example, that is 2. Okay, it's coming from str. We'll use a substring to extract those. We're going to start at the current index, which is I. And I need to do basically the next n characters. But if I just said n, I is updating. It is getting deeper and deeper in the string. Right? N in this example is 2. That's right here. But I is already like headed this direction. So it's not I comma n, but I comma I plus n. So it's the current index, then the current index plus n characters. Again, I've told you several times that if you take the difference of these parameters, that'll tell you the length of the string. The difference, the absolute difference in these parameters is n. What I'm adding here. So the length of this string will be n. I'm saving that into check. In this example, that is initially xb. I'm sorry, xy. What I want to know is that equal to the one that I'm looking for? If check equals first in. If this is true, that means I have found a match. I'm going to return true. If I manage to go through the entire string and I never find a match, that means it's not there. So I'm going to return false. Ripperoni. We had some index out of bounds issues. Why? In this example, I was looking for 3 characters. Right? So we're looking for ABX. We're going to start our search here. We'll ask, is this ABX? No. Is this ABX? No. Is this ABX? That's where I'm going out of bounds. Okay? So we need to back this up a little bit. I need to stop when I have n characters left. Right? If I'm looking for ABX, which has a length of 3, I need to stop when there's only 3 characters left. What controls when we stop? Our condition. So I'm going to subtract n off this. That's a lot of green, right? I got it right, right? Except this little sneaky guy. What's happening here? Right? With this one, we're looking for an A, and there is an A. It's here. Okay. So with that example, str has a value of AA. N has a value of 1. We're going to have a star kitty appearance today. So the first n characters is going to be A. I is going to be equal to n. So I has a value of 1. We're going to ask, is 1 less than the length of the string, that's 2, minus 1. No. 1, right? We're asking, how do I want to present this? We're asking, is 1 less than 2 minus 1? Is 1 less than 1? No, this is false. This is false right away. All the other ones were right. This looks super close. But think about some of our previous problems. I don't know if I have any solutions ready to go. I think I've deleted them all. With our count code, for instance, we were effectively looking for a string that had a length of 4, but we would stop -3. We would do it like -3, just a little bit earlier. With cat dog, we were looking for a string with exactly 3, but what we ended up doing with our condition was a -2. So by that logic, this is effectively a -1, right? There's 2 ways to do it. We can do an n-1 here, which you see we get it correct. Or we can say as long as I is less than or equal to this, which will give us an iteration on that value. Okay, what do I mean? With this particular example, we just changed the question a little bit. Is 1 less than or equal to 1? Yes. And that happens to work for everything else. Okay, I'm going to clean up the comments. That is a final look. The one thing I will say, surprised I haven't got any questions about this, but this is giving a true or false value, right? And my problem ultimately needs to return a true or false value. So why do I need to plug it in an if statement? We've seen similar situations where I'm getting a Boolean value and I'm just returning that. Before I run this, what's wrong with this? Why can't I do this? The lag there was not related. What's happening? The way this reads, we're going to loop through. We're going to cut our substring. We're going to ask, is that substring equal to the one we're looking for? If that's true, good. We get a true value. We return true. Boom, done. The problem is, if it's false, I completely stop my search because I get a false value and I return. Right? So don't forget that the moment that return statement executes, we exit the method. Here, I'm only returning if it's true. If it's false, we're going to keep going. That's the subtle difference. Right? We're going to stop there on prefix again, and I'll see you in the next one.